Welcome to Nightlight. Step away from the mainstream and gather around as we enlighten the world and our realities and travel this cosmic journey we call life. Join us as we share with you and provide that beacon that can guide us all to a better way. Explore with us as we examine a metaphysical montage of spiritual insights, covering everything from the mundane to the magical, UFOs to unicorns, and everything in between. This is a time of awakening, of sharing and evolving, of spreading our wings and soaring on the cosmic breath of creation. Come and join with other light-minded spirits as we weave our lights together to seek understanding, enlightenment, and, with a little luck, some wisdom. This is Nightlight, a reminder that you are never alone.
We are live on a Wednesday night. We had a tech issue last week, so tonight's show is rescheduled from 8 days ago. My original note, I was going to say I had the honor of speaking with Kathleen Marden, and at the end of April, just a couple weeks ago, at the Butler Organization for Research of the Unexplained. But now I have to add 8 days, and that kind of puts it over 3 weeks ago, but now we've turned over into June, so I'm confused now. That's why we don't do math on Nightlight. But we'll have a lot of fun tonight. And Kathleen Marden was a guest in the fall to discuss her 60th anniversary edition of Captured. And at the towards the end of the show, she said something like, have a new book out in April, and Forbidden Knowledge is out on time, and it's a fascinating read. Kathleen doesn't need much of an introduction other than she's the best ufologist, leading speaker at conferences, and you can see her on Ancient Aliens, and you'll see that she's a meticulous researcher. And while we review her canon, and if you want to learn more about Kathleen, you can go to her website, KathleenMardenUFO.com. Hi, Kathleen. How are you?
Hi, Mark. I'm doing well. How are you?
Oh, fine. Really looking forward to tonight's show, and it was so nice seeing in the Pittsburgh area again.
It was. I really enjoyed that conference. It was amazing because it was the largest attendance they have ever had. I think that, everyone was closed up over for 2 years when COVID was a major threat, and now they've lifted the masks and are going out to conferences, and it has been just wonderful. After the Pittsburgh conference, I was out in Oregon for the McMinnville conference, and that too had the largest attendance ever.
Okay, I'm sure a lot of people were just wanting to get out of the house, but you do an excellent job, so I'm sure you contributed to the attendance. And even when I met you the first time on, I'd reach down and pick up your alien abduction files, and when you spoke at the Pittsburgh MUFON conference on November 2nd, 2013, that was very well attended as well.
Yes. Yeah. It's I've spoken at loads and loads of conferences, and professionally I was a social worker, but then after that I became an educator. So I just really love learning, and when I learn something, I take it and I educate. And I think that there is greater interest now than there has been in a long time, because our government has, of course, announced that it is actually going to investigate UFOs, or now they call them UAPs again. And I certainly hope that they tell the truth this time. It appears that they might.
Okay. Did you get that impression from the recent congressional hearings?
Yes, well, I was, in the recent congressional hearings, some information was given that made me think, well, this is great. They understand what's going on. Also, I had wanted them to review all of the major studies that our government, our Air Force, has already done, dating back to 1947. And the largest studies that they ever did was released in 1955. It was a year before it was released to the press. But 3,201 cases were studied by the Battelle Memorial Institute, very prestigious. The scientists involved in this investigation had to agree, everyone had to agree, that it was a true unknown before it could be put into the known category, as opposed to being listed as psychological, balloon, birds, conventional craft, etc. And in the end, 21.5% were true unknowns. And there was a chi-square quality analysis done. Talk about you don't do math here. But a chi-square quality analysis done that showed that the chance of an unknown being just a missed known was less than 1%. So pretty extraordinary. But unfortunately, they said that they weren't going to look at the old work, the studies that had been done. And that is extraordinarily disappointing to me. In addition to that, the topic of UFOs hovering over nuclear bases, taking the nuclear weapons offline. In one case, 10 were taken offline at the same time. And the two people in charge were shaking their heads as if they had never heard of this. So that was extraordinarily disappointing to me, how Mr. LaHood was one of the people. I'm looking for the other name. I don't see it here. Well, anyway, these two men are the head of government projects, and you would think that they would at least know what the rest of us know. This has been presented very widely to the public, yet the two people at the head of this program are unaware of it. They didn't look like they were lying. So I don't know what to make of that.
Okay, so that sounds a little bit like some of the early congressional hearings in the 50s that you cover in Fact, Fiction, and Flying Saucers. was the Robertson panel from 1953?
Yes, the Robertson panel was a CIA-funded study of several cases. They had government scientists there, CIA officers, some couple of people from the Air Force. Alan Hynek was there, but he wasn't permitted to speak with the rest when the rest of the group did. He was only permitted to give his address to the group after they made their decisions. And the Robertson panel was terribly disappointing because the decision was made that the American public not be aware that UFOs are real and that we are being visited by this other civilization, and that those who have credible sightings should be ridiculed to sort of dissuade the public from having an interest in this topic. It didn't work. The private UFO groups received loads and loads of information, but I guess it took some of the heat off the government. And, here in 1953 is about the time that Air Force policy started to change. They decided to take the real unknown cases, the interesting cases, out of Project Blue Book and to handle it under a separate channel, and that what would be released to the public would only be what could be explained. So that was pretty deceptive to the public and to ufologists for many years. And then ufologists saw that there was a pattern, and it was clearly a cover-up. And, so it went on from there, and then, it was closed down at the end of 1969. And Edward Condon, who had done the scientific study on UFOs, that I found a letter that actually gave evidence that before the study was even done, the Air Force had determined the conclusion that they wanted Condon to come to. And so Condon didn't take the study very seriously. But if you go into the Condon report, there are some very good cases. But at the front of that report, the part that Dr. Edward Condon wrote, he said things like there'd be no expectation of having contact with any extraterrestrial civilization in the next 10,000 years. So just more deception, and I'm hoping that the government will now at least admit that something is going on here. They probably can't admit that abductions are real, that people are being taken to craft, because militarily we're defenseless against that. So the only defense we have is propaganda to the public to say that it's not real and these people just have mental health issues or have misperceived, which is totally false, of course, but that's what we have to deal with. That's been going on for a very long time.
Okay, and while you were talking about the history of some of these congressional hearings that led up to the one from about a couple weeks ago, you mentioned those who were very interested in the topic deal with ridicule, the government's responses to use deception, the inevitable, it was swamp gas, type of statement to easily dismiss it. But in your new book, Forbidden Knowledge, it's a I'd say it's a courageous autobiography, and you just basically come out with some a little bit different statements than what you were just talking about. But you say, I had hesitated to author this book because my journey was incomplete, nearly a lifelong struggle with the unknown. And you go on to say, until now, I concealed my knowledge because certain powers threatened to stand in my way. The power of disinformation and ridicule runs in its mission to enforce pervasive ignorance and limit access to this secret knowledge. Okay, that's a ominous start to your book, but there are many positive life lessons to be learned from your autobiography.
Yes, absolutely. And what I was talking about at the beginning of the book and the introduction that you were reading from is that one of the reasons I decided to write this book now is because government officials such as Lou Elizondo and has come forward. Dr. James Lukatsky from the DIA, used to be the director of the DIA. He came forward and said that this is real, and we don't fully understand it, but it's real. And Colm Kelleher, who is a government scientist, has come forward. It was Ronald Moultrie, who is the U.S. Undersecretary for Intelligence and Security, and Scott Bray, the Deputy Director of Navy Intelligence, who were the ones who were ignorant about, at least they claim to be, about the nuclear power, the nuclear, not power, but the nuclear weapons being shot down. So they have this new program, AIMSOG, which is the third version of this investigation by the Department of Defense, this new investigation. But at least the government is looking. Some are much further ahead than others. I'm very, very pleased with some of these individuals. I know people people in my field have been questioning Lou Elizondo's integrity, if he ever even held a position in the program. And his name was mentioned during that congressional hearing. So I know for a fact, that why would they mention his name if he had not been a part of it? So he was a part of the ATIP program, which was the declassified title of another program, the earlier program.
And there are just more and more people reporting their sightings, and it just seems like it's only news to the government. Like they're the last to know.
The Mutual UFO Network is alive and well. They're receiving all kinds of sighting reports and also UFO abduction and contact reports. So They have been doing it for a long time and continue to do it.
Okay, so that's a thing. MUFON. That's a good lead into one of my questions. Is you eloquently write about what so many of us face on each day, but we want to remain silent. But you remain positive. Throughout forbidden knowledge, you contrast positive and negative thought, and that goes throughout many of your other books. You were an eyewitness to Betty and Barney's the aftermath of their abduction. You cover the harassment and negative consequences and captured, and spoke about it. When people look at your canon, one of the themes that links so many of your books is the role of memory in paranormal experiences.
It's the role of memory, whether it's a paranormal experience or just memory for anything. I have spent a great deal of my life studying the function of memory. And I first became interested. I was a psychology student and sociology student in college. I took a pretty well-rounded curriculum. But I was very much interested in the hypnosis that my aunt and uncle had with Dr. Benjamin Simon. I noticed that the disinformants and the skeptics failed to mention that they had separate hypnosis sessions and that Dr. Simon reinstated amnesia at the end of each session so that they couldn't contaminate one another's information. That's a really important point, but the skeptics don't have wiggle room if you bring that information out, because I was able to do a comparative analysis of Betty's and Barney's statements from their hypnosis tapes, from the very beginning of their trip all the way through. I studied their speech patterns. I studied and compared the way they think, the way they state things, remember things, their interactions with one another. And what I discovered is that that is only one piece of scientific evidence. Social science, that's scientific evidence, that the experience on the craft was the same all the way through. And not just on the craft, but the entire trip, it was the same. And as some have said that Barney knew everything that was in Betty's dreams. She had dreams, and 5 dreams about contact. And skeptics have said that Betty's dreams and the ETs were different. Betty and Barney had described different extraterrestrials. Well, that's not true either. Betty and Barney described the same, but the ETs in Betty's dreams looked human. They looked Southern European. They were wearing cadets' uniforms. That's not what Betty and Barney saw. But dreams served the function of helping Betty to work through her anxiety over what had occurred. They happened just before she woke up in the morning. And what is important about these dreams is that they can include true information from things that have actually occurred. But then interspersed with that is fantasy for things that might be too disturbing. So in Betty's dream state, just before she woke up, which is a sort of a hypnopompic state, it's a hypnotic state, she was seeing these very human men who talked with mouths, and come the anxiety. Barney didn't have that. And with my background in psychiatric social work and psychology, I take a very close look at that. I'm just, that's what I do. And so the psychology of everything is more important to me than nearly anything, except for, of course, the physical evidence and the circumstantial evidence, which is quite clear too. But when Elizabeth Loftus was the professor who introduced false memory syndrome into academic studies, and then started to do tests on people who said they'd been abducted by ETs to find out what was wrong with these people, and did tests. Susan Clancy then followed that up. She did tests as well. Susan Clancy was a postgraduate student at Harvard at that time, and she worked with a professor at Harvard. But the studies that they did were really not a good indication of a person's memory, because when you have been abducted, you very often have conscious recall of observing craft. Most experiencers, and this is intergenerational within families, have seen craft close up. And then often they have seen the non-human entities close up. They have conscious recall of this. Some of them remember entities in their bedroom. In fact, on the study that I worked on with the Mutual UFO Network, the ERT, with Dr. Don C. Donderi and Dr. Michael Austin Melton, Denise Stoner, and Craig Lang, we asked the question, have you had the symptoms of sleep paralysis, essentially. I didn't say sleep paralysis. I said, have you woken up at night feeling paralyzed and able only to move your eyes? Well, an incredibly high percentage said yes. It was something like 95% who said yes, they'd had that experience. But then I said, have you been awake and entities entered your environment and then you became paralyzed? Well, among the experiencer group overall, it dropped to 35-40%. But for the group of people who were identified as being true abductees, they had the knowledge and they had the emotional part of it as well. It increased exponentially. It was very high. So, that tells us that you cannot write all this off as sleep paralysis. And that's something else that the skeptics have offered up. It's all sleep paralysis. Well, what about Betty and Barney Hill, who were wide awake? What about Travis Walton, who was wide awake. There were 3 women in Kentucky. There were men up on the Allagash of Maine. It goes on and on and on with people who were wide awake when this occurred. So, and then you have to ask, why did they forget this? Part of it, the part about being on the craft. A lot of people remember part of being on the craft, but not all of it. And so then the question is, are the extraterrestrials doing this, or is it the electromagnetic field that is unintentionally causing problems with human memory? Now, I have done experiments with this. And I did one experiment with one of the members of the Council of 8 that I talked about in Forbidden Knowledge, a personal journey from alien abduction to spiritual transformation. And it was very interesting. He told me, he was a little gray, he told me that I had a scientific mind, a keen scientific mind, and therefore he wanted to communicate with me. And so I said that was fine. He was a scientist as well. And so we started to communicate, and he gave me information, and I was writing this information down along with my question. This was telepathic, and a telepathic exchange of information. And it's a good thing I did write it down, because when we were finished communicating, I had no memory of what was said. My husband was there as a witness. He saw what was occurring, but I had no memory. So I'm wondering if it was that sort of a strong tingling that I feel in my body when they are nearby. Maybe that is a sign of the electromagnetic field that has toyed with people's memories so that we have partial memories but not complete. But then other experiencers believe that the ETs might have pointed something at them and erased their memory intentionally. So maybe it's both. I don't know, but certainly memory has been a huge theme in all of my books.
Yeah, and with memory, and you just mentioned the intergenerational encounters. You know, Barney wanted to basically forget the whole thing happened. You in your alien abduction files, Denise has clear recollections of the like children in the fetuses in the jars. Betty wanted to remember the experience by taking excuse me, the book, this is the souvenir book with her. Other people need hypnosis to recall the memory, and you also present one case of in Forbidden Knowledge of Hannah, who is a ghost who seems like she wanted to be remembered. So you have various aspects of memories. You also talk about glimpses early on in your book. So how does like all the intergenerational, like you and your mom, her sister, Betty, you and and at the conference you mentioned your son had these all these different paranormal experiences. How has that intergenerational theme, how is that developing over the generations? And does it usually keep going? Is there any end to the family members that are going to be have these paranormal encounters?
Many people say that their families have been taken for 5 generations.
Okay.
Now. And I want to make something clear about my son. He has not had multiple paranormal experiences. When he was 4 years old, I heard noise in his bedroom in the middle of the night that woke me up. And he was laughing and playing and having a great time in there. And so I got up out of bed and I went, I opened the door. I'd left the night light on for him. And there he was chasing a conscious orb around the room. I knew it was not ball lightning. The conditions were not right for it. It appeared to have intelligence. And there he was, jumping into the air to bat it, and it would move, and it was very gleeful. But I was extraordinarily distressed when I saw this. So I picked my little boy up and I took him into bed with me for the rest of the night. So that was what I'd stated about my son. So I'm not saying that he is an experiencer. I don't talk about anyone except for my aunt, my uncle, my mother, and myself in the family. And there are very good reasons for that, because people lose jobs, people lose reputations, people lose their businesses, their marriages over things like this being made public. And I don't believe that anyone should expose any information about other family members, including their names.
Because when you get cover a lot of the events, the paranormal events that you experienced, you eventually formed a group. We call it the Council of Four. How did that come about? Did Denise? It was Denise Stoner was a participant, and you work closely with her to write the alien abduction files.
Yes, Denise and I have worked together on research for many years. I trust her implicitly. She is a very fine researcher. She's the assistant director of MUFON's Experiencer Resource Team. She's the assistant director of Florida MUFON. She's very scientific in what she does. Now, Kevin Briggs, who is a former police officer, he grew up in England, has had contact since he was a boy, and also contact with conscious orbs that have intelligence. And he went to MUFON's International Symposium in Orlando, Florida in 2016. And he went to the support group for experiencers that Denise was holding. And she met him there. He talked a little bit about his experiences. And then he went to have lunch, and all of the seats were taken. There was one table with one seat, but there were women sitting at the table. So he approached, and Dr. Melanie Barton Bragg was seated at the table. Well, she is not only a minister, but she is also a psychotherapist, and I had known her for a while at that time, and considered her to be a very good person to be on this investigative team to determine what was actually going on. You have to be skeptical. First, you have to question whether Kevin, who was acting as the medium, sort of channeling this extraterrestrial, was in his right mind. He was a very down-to-earth person, real estate agent, just about as stable and non-UFO abductee as you could possibly imagine. His wife taught at a university and was a researcher at a university. She's also very well grounded. And so Kevin had offered us the opportunity to ask questions to this Council of Eight that he was in contact with. And I thought that I wanted to do that. I was never going to speak of it, and I was always focused on obtaining scientific evidence that it was real, that it was true. And so was Denise. So we used scientific measures such as a laser thermometer. And at one time when this council came into the room, we couldn't see them, but we could feel their presence. So they came in and introduced themselves using Kevin's voice, one at a time, and said that they are fifth and sixth dimensional beings, and that's the reason we are not able to see them. But when we elevate our vibration, we will then be able to see them. It's just that our vibration is so much lower than theirs. And we did occasionally see like a shadow. We also could, as I said, had that very strong electrical tingling sensation in our bodies. And with those fifth and sixth dimensionals, there was about a 6-degree increase in the temperature in the part of the room where they were standing. Then when the ninth dimensional came in, and with his big booming voice, he said that he is a watcher, that he was Anunnaki, that he had lived on this planet during our ancient history. He had had many incarnations here, and that he no longer has a body. He had elevated to the ninth dimension, and that he and the others are in this quadrant of our galaxy, sort of as watchers, overseers, protecting this quadrant. Now, he said, or I already told you that, we measured the temperature of the area of the room where he was standing. It was an 8-degree increase in temperature. So we have scientific measurements compared to other parts of the room that we were measuring, that in that particular location, it was much warmer. And we live in Florida. We did not have a heat vent nearby. If anything, it would have gotten colder from air conditioning.
Okay.
So that was that was very interesting. Now, in the beginning, Kevin had a great deal of difficulty doing this. He had never channeled before. He did it for the first time when at a conversation we all gathered at my house after we'd gone out to lunch together. And he was asking, we were asking him questions, and he was answering. And then Melanie and Denise realized that he was channeling. I didn't realize that. I'd talked to one channeler before who was responsible for sending ETs to heal me. I talk about that in the book, too, which was an extraordinary experience and made me realize that it is not all bunk. I know that everything that's channeled is true, that some people hoax it, some people fantasize it, whatever. But some of it is true. And so we were able to ask two questions, or one or two questions to begin with. And then Kevin grew very tired and weak, and he was drenched with perspiration. His face, his clothes were soaking wet. And that was it. We got some answers to our questions about who they were, why they were here, and as I already told you, about their dimension, about their purpose. And eventually they told us that they wanted to show us evidence that they were extraterrestrials. That's what we wanted. We asked for that. And so they set it up with us that we would receive or actually be able to view this evidence individually. They went to Melanie first. A light came in the first night. She didn't have a close encounter. They told her that it was because there were a lot of neighbors out in their yards. And there were a lot of neighbors. So they didn't want to come in close. But they have come in closer to Melanie. They've communicated with Melanie, and she has an ongoing relationship with them. With Denise, she was next. And she went outside her home, and she saw a new light in the sky that moved in an unconventional pattern. And she had other experiences as well, not to the degree that Melanie did, but some pretty good experiences that convinced her that this was real. And then came my turn. Now, I wanted to see a craft close up over the lake that I live on. I didn't want to stay up until midnight to see this. So I said I wanted to see it early in the morning before it was daylight. So I was out there before dawn, and I felt a very strong tingling in my body. Zark came in. I was seated on my deck looking out on the lake, and suddenly I saw turbulence in the water, and it was in about a 35-foot circle, I would say. I'd never seen anything like that on my lake before. I thought, could this possibly be a school of fish all swimming around and around in a circle? I've never seen that. I've seen a duck paddle and create a circle, but nothing like what I was looking at. And so I just was waiting for this craft to rise up out of the lake, and it never did. So I was terribly disappointed because I didn't get the kind of confirmation that I wanted. And I still have not seen a craft up close being shown by them. I've seen craft up close, but not by them. However, Kevin has photographs of craft that have come up fairly close in his backyard. And they have shown me orbs, 3 gray orbs with sort of amber-colored centers bobbing along my lawn at night. They've shown me lights. They've shown all of us turbulence on the lake. They have shown me a big red orb that was coming in closer and closer, and I was hoping it was going to come in very close, but then suddenly it was like an explosion, and it dispersed into these smaller orbs and then disappeared. So that was something that I saw too. So that, along with the evidence we were able to measure, convinced us that at least something was going on here. Are they extraterrestrial entities? Are they interdimensionals from here on Earth? They claim that they are extraterrestrials to us, but not to themselves. So, probably saying like, well, you're not extraterrestrials to yourselves either. So, but they are here. And they, in our book, I put 120 questions that we asked and their detailed answers to these questions. I was very satisfied with the experience, and still from time to time have ongoing contact. And we met with Kevin for 2 full years, once a month. And then since then, we've met with him a couple of times a year.
Okay. So when you start this section of forbidden knowledge, it's a lot of transcripts. Is that because I don't know if that's the right word, but
yes, I recorded everything that was said. I collected the questions, and then I recorded all of the answers to the questions. And then I went home and I transcribed all of it. So that is what you see in my book, is the transcriptions of our questions one by one and their answers and who it was who answered. Sometimes it was Ort, who is an Arcturian who has a human appearance. He's he's about 6 feet tall, maybe taller than that, wears a blue uniform. I believe he has dark blonde or hair. You'll see my rendition of Ort in the book based upon just what I've gotten through my third eye. But I've asked Kevin, and Kevin said, yes, that's what Ort looks like. He has seen Ort. He's been on craft with Ort when he was, 15 years old. And prior to that, when he was 9 years old, he saw Ort as well. So then we have Ra, who is the 9th dimensional, and he answers questions. And he says, for one thing, I asked, well, are you the Ra, who was the sun god in Egypt? And he said, no, but I was in Egypt. I had a life in Egypt.
He also says he was an Anunnaki.
Yes. Yes, he's the one who was an Anunnaki. And then he has a female counterpart. And the way he states it is that Shiva, is his right side. So I don't know if they're one joined consciousness, both male and female, or how you interpret that. But she is a 9th dimensional healer, and I've had evidence of her healing and am very grateful to her for the healing that she has done. I ask her to come to me sometimes, and she will, and I'll be healed. Melanie has also been healed from some major physiological problems by Shiva. So, and it's not the Indian god Shiva, Shiva. It's
Right.
supposedly Sheeva, and just a ninth dimensional female intelligence.
Okay, and you mentioned Zark. So there's, I think we went through the named everyone.
Everyone that we talked with,
Okay.
except for when they introduced themselves. Now, Dee is Ort's partner, a woman. Zark is the small gray scientist that I communicated with. Then there's Orla, and Orla is a tall white. She has come to me during meditation. I have seen Arna out of just the corners of my eyes as a kind of a bright blue color. She's a blue avian. Then there's Chica, who is a mantis, and I've seen him in my mind's eye as well, and he was a very jolly fellow, even though he's, has an exoskeleton and is a large bug-looking kind of guy. Mm-hmm. He has I like him. He had almost a cartoon character smile on his face on one side when I saw him in my mind's eye. And then there's Targ, and I have not met Targ yet, and he is a tall gray.
Okay.
So there are no reptilians on the council. They say that they have invited them, but the reptilians do not want to cooperate and be on a council because they would have to follow the council's rules, sort of the Galactic Federation's rules, and that the reptilians throughout our galaxy and elsewhere in other galaxies believe that they're just the owners of everything, that they put themselves on and can do whatever they want and don't have to live by the same rules that others do. Now, I know that there have been wars in the ancient past between the Greys and the reptilians. We've been given that information, but nothing in recent times.
Yeah, it was interesting that you're really focusing on the 8 ET characters, but they also do give a background about the reptilians and their history, the interactions between the different species, and it was contentious, and the 8 with whom you and all your council of 4 it really developed. I learned a lot about positive thinking. There really is a more of a religious overtone to their appearance in the channeling sessions.
Well, at least spiritual.
Yeah.
They say that there is one creator and that we all share the same consciousness and the same creator. So that was something that I found very interesting, especially since some experiencers are having Marian apparitions. They're seeing the Mother Mary appear in front of them, and some are being given prophecy. And that's definitely religious when you get to that sort of thing. So, I mean, I'm still in a quandary about that. I don't have the answers on that sort of thing, but I found it incredibly interesting.
Oh no, I do too. You mentioned that Christ consciousness is in there. Yeah, that the Council of Eight is almost acting in a role of guardian angels. That's mentioned in the Bible as well. The way you depict the 8 characters reveals something, a positive. They bring something positive to you, whether it's through feelings or the messages. Would visions be the right terminology?
I have had visions. That's quite common among experiencers. So occasionally I will have a vision. For example, and this has been going on for a long time with me, Stanton Friedman's son was not doing well. He had hemophilia, and he had blood transfusions that caused him to develop hepatitis C, which is extraordinarily prevalent among those with hemophilia during a certain time frame before the blood banks realized that they were not killing it. And so he was very ill, and he was waiting for a transplant. And so Stanton was telling me about his son and how they thought that he might be able to have that transplant within a month. And when Stanton said that, I had a vision. And it was a bar, and there was a wing on each side of that bar, and his name, James, was written on that, and it was flying up into the air. And I knew at that point that James was going to die within the next month, and he did. So that's just an example of the types of visions that I've had, many, some more significant than others.
Okay, and now I guess that's prophecy, or it's their appearance in your life, what you have transcribed from the interactions with them. They just seem like they were bringing something good to those who are open to it. Can you say that Betty and Barney's abductors were doing something similar
Well, they were testing DNA from Betty and Barney. They were also checking them out, checking out their health. They always do that. Nowadays, if somebody has a problem and they've been working with the ETs for many, many years, the ETs will heal them. Now, in terms of what Betty and Barney were going through, although Betty and Barney were terrified, the Greys told them that they would not be harmed, that they only needed to do a few simple tests and they would be on their way home in no time. And at the end, Betty actually had a positive attitude toward the one that she called the leader, who was the communicator, the one who communicated with her. And when he walked her back to the car after Barney had already been taken to the car, she invited him back. And she said, I know you're not from around here, but if you can come back, then I might be able to arrange a meeting between you and others who are much more knowledgeable about this than I am. And he said, well, that decision is not for me to make. Maybe I can come back, but I'm not certain. And she said, well, if you can come back, how will you find me? Out of all the people on this planet, how will you find me? And he said, we can always find those that we want to find. Now, I've been told that each abductee or experience or whatever word you want to use, some people like to use the word contactee, but each has a certain vibration. Now, I don't know if the implant is what causes that vibration. I think that it is a communication device. I think that it facilitates communication between them and the higher realms and me. So they can always find me, and they can always find other experiencers too. And I'm wondering if this was not Betty's first abduction, only the first that she remembered. That is my question. I don't know if I'll ever have it answered, but that's what I'm wondering.
That's just a fascinating statement.
Yes. Yeah. Well, I should tell your listeners that the major reason that I decided to even take part in this study with Kevin Briggs was because my Aunt Betty Hill had told me about Admiral and Helen Knowles. And they were a couple who lived right across the river from Betty and Barney. Betty and Barney were in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. And the Knowles family had a house right across the river. And Betty and Barney had gone over to meet them after they were invited to brunch. And Betty and Barney were hesitant about going because they thought they would be ridiculed. But when they arrived, there were many people from the Navy, their officers from the Navy and their wives, and also from the Canadian military. And they all met, and they talked about UFOs. And they even had a piece of metal from a craft that they were passing around. So that was very interesting. It got me started out on who was this Admiral Knowles and what can I find out about him. And there was also a woman named Frances Swan. And Betty said, Frances Swan said that she always talked to the benevolent Space Brothers and that Betty had communicated with the evil one. So Francis Swan would not meet my aunt, Betty. So I did research background on Francis Swan, had all of the information that I could find. Even Jacques Vallée had written about a communication experiment that he was aware of, the CIA took part in because of communications between Francis Swan that went on to Admiral Knowles and Wilbert Smith from the Canadian government. And so I thought, this is fascinating. Can I get some information on this? I wonder if I can. And if I possibly can, I want to know what they said. And so I talked about it on radio shows, how I was looking for this information. And at one conference in Exeter, New Hampshire, Admiral Knowles' granddaughter came.
Oh,
and
wow.
she brought me a thick packet of communication, letters between Admiral Knowles and Wilbur Smith, and also some of the messages that were communicated to Francis Swan. So that was a gold mine for me. That got me started on all of this, because what they had discovered is that the ETs were here. They said this was back in 1954. To guide and assist us. They would provide competent teachers to educate all of us. They said that humans must become more spiritual and raise their vibrational level. That's what we're hearing today from many, many people. You think of Dolores Cannon. That was one of her major themes. It's a major theme of the spiritual community, and among some ufologists as well. They said we must stop polluting the earth. That was a major concern of theirs way back in 1954. They said that there's a displaced magnetic field problem on Earth caused by nuclear explosions, especially around Japan, and that they were working to repair this. And Wilbert Smith was actually able to acquire evidence that this was true. And they said all vibration is sound. Sound waves permeate the universe and affect the human body. Become peaceful, and your sound will create peace. And so this was just extraordinary. But they offered technical knowledge to our government, but the government wouldn't take it, because they were going to provide technical knowledge, but it would be so incomplete that no nation can take advantage of it to the detriment of other nations. So absolute neutrality was requisite in all their contacts with earthlings and earth governments. And of course, nationalism is the name of the game. Tribal warfare is our major activity, and it's been going on since the beginning of time. And we were not ready to change. And, so we didn't take advantage of this. And just recently, I was listening to a show. It was an interview with Jim Sullivan. And Jim Sullivan was a CIA intelligence officer, senior officer from the CIA's Director of Operations. And he has admitted that he actually did have entities appear in his bedroom in the middle of the night. And he didn't call it an abduction. He called it an experience. And he talked about how the government and media have made those of us who have had encounters out to be crazy. And he made the statement that this is unconscionable. But he said that it's an extraordinary complex phenomena. And we don't fully understand it yet. But with regards to our having the Council of Eight land on the lawn at the UN, and for them to get out and to meet with the heads of other nations, he made the statement that he thought that this was extraordinarily dangerous. And so I guess as a CIA, retired CIA agent, that he was probably voicing what the intelligence community has concerns about.
Kathleen, you're just talking about most people don't have the understanding yet. We're not ready to change. But they do just say, like the Council of Eight, is offering positive, life-changing experiences. And when Reverend Michael Carter has been a guest with us, we haven't had Travis. But there was a recently, Hieronymus has just recently put up a show on the Nightlight, Barbara's webpage. But do Michael and Travis, since you know them, all three of you have written about healing experiences, a greater awareness to benefit humanity, be more environmentally conscious. Topics like that. Are you finding that what Michael and Travis have discussed are just pretty standard post experiences, post changes in the experiencer?
Yes, absolutely. Experiencers of contact become more spiritual. We become psychic. Some of us can heal the sick. So we are empaths. Among the abductee group, 95% are empaths. So that means more than just having empathy. That means that if we permit our into another person's aura, we can feel the health of their body in our own bodies. So I work through hypnosis, the quantum healing hypnosis technique, with people. And I can get into their aura. I can feel where the pain is in the body and say, what's going on here? And then I hear. And then that's something that I will focus on while they are in hypnosis. And we are finally toward the end where I channel healing from above. And when I channel it, I feel a very strong tingling that comes down through my crown chakra, through the top of my head. I hold my hands out over a person. It could be a foot or two. I always have my eyes closed. And that very strong tingling sensation moves down my arms and down out through my hands to that other person. If you read my website on hypnosis, you'll read a couple of testimonials from people who have been healed from things like having to have a knee replacement to not having to have surgery to becoming healed. A person who had rheumatoid arthritis, psoriatic arthritis, who was healed of both, and that person had been disabled with it. It doesn't work on everybody. It depends upon what kind of agreement that person made when they came into this lifetime. Some people are paying karmic debts, and they're doing this by being ill with a certain disease or condition. But a number of people have been healed as well, and that's what Dolores Cannon was known for, past life regressions and then this healing. But I do the healing if I'm doing past life regression or if I'm doing a regression with an individual who has had contact and just wants to learn more about what occurred than they already know. But I always require that people will have some conscious recall.
It's just, it's really interesting to see patterns emerge when people are writing about their experiences. They come to the same conclusions, without knowing each other or communicating, and it seems like it adds more validity to this whole phenomenon.
Yes, and I think if you take the time to really look into it instead of just dismissing it with the flick of your hand, you will find that some of this is real and there is scientific evidence for it.
Mm-hmm.
And, as Wilbert Smith found in the chapter that I wrote in the book about Admiral Knowles. And some of the things that we have been told are being borne out. I have to tell you that I had worked with a man, and I didn't know if he was actually an experiencer of negative ET contact or if this was demonic. But I was, as a researcher, wanting the answer. He was saying that he was taken to an underground base where all kinds of horrific things were occurring. And there were definitely satanic undertones to this. And so I kept working with him rather than using my better judgment. And I ended up having my vibrational frequency lowered by a horrific statement that he made to me about these ETs and what they did. And one of them came through and attached to me. I still don't know if it was a draconian reptilian shapeshifter or if it was a demon or if there is a difference between the two. But once it attached, I did everything I could to detach it. Now, and it was wreaking havoc in my life. I normally sleep well. I fall asleep right away at night. I was having difficulty sleeping. I normally feel good. I was suddenly feeling like there was a dark cloud hanging over me. My body began to hurt. I've seen this in other people who have a relationship with these horrific shape-shifting reptilian, draconian reptilians. So it became worse and worse. I was using holy water. I had my crucifix on the wall, one next to my bed, all sorts of different things that people told me. I blessed my house. I had a cross above every door and window with holy oil. I did everything. I prayed. It wouldn't go away. And finally, it grew so large, it started to speak to me. And it told me, essentially, that I needed to commit suicide. And that is when I became alarmed, because I've never had that thought before. And there was no reason to have that thought except for something externally doing this to me. So I called Melanie, who was a minister, Melanie Barton Bragg, Dr. Melanie, and she lived 3 hours away from me, and told her what had happened, and she said that she would try to remove it, but she couldn't remove it from a distance. It was too powerful. So she said that she would come down in a couple of weeks and remove it for me. Well, in the interim, I called Kevin Briggs right away, and I said, Kevin, this is what has happened to me. Will you please ask the council to help me? They said they would protect me, and this has happened. And he said, okay, I'll let you know, and I'll get back to you, Kathy. Well, before he could even let me know, I was completely healed. That attachment was detached. I was back to my old self. It happened overnight, maybe within hours of the time I called Kevin. And I can tell you that it is not a fantasy that caused this. This was something that was real. I've seen it happen to other people. And unfortunately, if it doesn't get detached, their health becomes worse and worse and worse, and they finally become completely disabled. So you have to raise your vibrational frequency. Apparently, Ra did this for me. He detached it. I was back to my higher vibration. And if you go to my website at KathleenMarden.com, under my essays on contact, you're going to find 2 essays on how to raise your vibrational frequency if you have any of these lower vibrating entities coming into your environment, how to get rid of them, because you have to raise your vibration. And they can do something to you very rapidly, by creating terror in you. They did that at the Skinwalker Ranch with the scientists who were there, who ended up taking them home. So, but the way that you can stop this is through meditation, by listening to higher vibrational music, and just feeling love, the meditation to elevate spiritually. There are some beautiful guided meditations. And every time I begin to feel my vibrational level declining because I've stopped meditating, I've been too busy, then I start with those guided meditations again, and it comes back. So it's very important to do this if you're having negative contact.
Yeah, and in your extraterrestrial contact, what to do when you've been abducted, you, Denise, and Ann Castle have a chapter on these dark forces, and later in the book you do suggest call upon a higher power. So there is you do cover the information that's out there for listeners who may believe that they are having a serious problem.
Yes, the chapter is called When You Want It to Stop, Coping Strategies and Resistance Techniques. And
Mm-hmm.
so I get into my own story, the one that I just told you, and then how to take back control of your life. The different things that will cause you to lower your vibrational frequency so it makes it easier for these things to attach to you, and how to prepare yourself for healing and to get over this. And even atheists can do this because you only have to call upon the highest intelligence. You know, you can call on God if you believe in God, but I'm not going to say that if you don't believe in God, you're stuck with this lower vibrating thing. I know that some people will say that, but I believe there is help for everyone. All you have to do is become a more loving person. And the way to do that is what I just told you. Go to YouTube, look for consciousness raising, vibration raising, healing, guided meditations, and higher vibrational music. Do it in the beginning at least twice a day. Then you can do it once a day when you're feeling better, when this isn't happening to you anymore. Then you can do it not every day if you don't want to, 2 or 3 times a week. And so on and so forth. You judge for yourself. But, you know, I wanted to help people, and I really put myself at great risk in order to determine exactly what was occurring. And I do want to continue to help people. For many years, people came to me, and they were just having these horrible contact experiences. They were living their lives in fear. There was a time I was living my life in fear. You have to learn more, and you have to learn how to elevate that vibration and express love. I ask people, once you feel that higher vibrational sense of love, go out into your neighborhood and project this love toward everything that's there. I've experimented on it, and I know that it works. I began by projecting love toward plants. I was never good at keeping plants alive. There are plants that should have died in my yard, and they are growing and flourishing and just beautiful. Then I tried the little lizards that run all over the place here in Florida, geckos. And they used to be terribly afraid of me. And they'd run. And then I projected that love toward them. They felt it. They stopped in their tracks, and their little ruby red throat puffed out. So that told me they're feeling this love. And that particular one, whatever it was that I was working on at that particular time, that was my evidence. Then I took it down the street to the pasture and to the sandhill cranes who come to the lake to feed. And I discovered that they lost their fear of me as a human. They had been, especially the sandhill cranes with their babies, they would bring their babies to show them to me. They would let me be near them. It was just amazing.
Okay.
It's what you can do. And everyone can do this, I'm convinced.
Well, yeah, and that was one of the things. Once we started talking about your newest book, that there is a lot of information in it for readers. It's insightful. It's timely with everything that's going on in the world today. Most people don't have answers, and they aren't listening. But Zark or Raw needs to have like some kind of breakthrough with a lot more people to get us on the right track.
Yes, and that's why I wrote the second half of my book on the Council of Eight. The first half is about my life and my experiences with extraterrestrials and the multi-generational contact in my family and the evidence. But I wanted to introduce people to the Council of Eight. I thought that it was extraordinarily important for people, for humans to receive these messages that we received, because it changed my life, I have to tell you, having contact with them. And there are probably more people around the world who are meeting with these councils. I know that there's a man in Australia. His name is Paul Hamden, and I've known him since 2012. And his ETs, as I said earlier, healed me from a long-standing, incurable illness that I had had for many years. And he's for real to these ETs as well.
Okay, and one of Ort's discussions with you, he talks about we are in your solar system. We have been here for a while. We come from different star systems, from the Pleiades, from Sirius, from Andromeda, and from Zeta Reticuli. We are a very old species, and some of our planets no longer exist, but we can travel anywhere. Is what Ort was saying there, is he making some kind of reference to Marjorie Fish's star map from your Captured book that she developed based on what Betty remembered of the the information that she was given about where her abductors came from?
I don't think, correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think I asked that question about Zeta Reticuli. I do know that Paul Hamden's entities, the council that he speaks with, say that the Greys were based in Zeta Reticuli.
I'm sorry. It was Kevin who seems to have said it starting on page 139 and goes over to 140.
Okay.
And Ort says, we come from different star systems, from the Pleiades, from Sirius, from Andromeda, and Zeta Reticuli.
Okay. I have 139 here.
Mm-hmm.
To 140. What question are you reading?
16.
16. Okay. So what star system is each member of the council from? And, they did mention Zeta Reticuli. I had forgotten that. I wish I had the memory I had when I was younger. I had complete recall in high school. Never had to study for an exam, but no, as time went on, my memory has faded. But yes, it says Zeta Reticuli.
You're only 29. Don't worry about it.
So, yes. Well, that is interesting. So I'm going to have to ask Zark if he hails from Zeta Reticuli, because maybe he was with the same group or knows of the group that took my family.
Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering. Is there that possibility? Just so many different things that you present throughout all of your books that is kind of leapfrog from one topic to the other, and you just open up all these different doors to these things that probably a lot of us, kind of whisper about.
Mm-hmm.
Or wonder, but you're talking with these different beings. It's just really fascinating when you look at the limitless possibilities found within the universe. And too many of us, we just get boxed into, just the same
they
way
can't
of
get
thinking.
here from there.
Right. It's just
that kind of thinking.
Right.
Yeah.
It's just it's just a bunch of rehashed ideas, and you're not really advancing.
Right.
Your books cause us to move forward in a positive way.
Yes, I think an understanding. And I see here in question 14, my family has been targeted for contact, and I would like some answers. Were they selected for contact? Why were they selected for contact? And why is my family part of the Grays program? And the answer is there is no particular reason why people are chosen for the abduction experience. But once the family has been chosen, then it can occur down the family line. And they had told me that initially they just took people opportunistically, kids on the back lands of the family farm, people out fishing or hunting or camping or hiking, driving down a lonely road, etc. But when they found what they were looking for, then they began to take people down the family line. And they said usually the first choices when people were alone and they were not missed. Your family was not chosen for any particular reason, just the same as all families are chosen for the experiment. But, so we're all part of an experiment. But they say that they took us along family lines so that they could monitor and measure progress intergenerationally, sort of as our own scientists do when they're attempting to make positive changes. So maybe they gave me a higher level of intelligence than I had when I was a baby and a young girl. They've certainly done a number of things that have changed me in many ways. And, when I was a kid, I thought that I was the same as everyone else. But then over time, and particularly as I searched for answers through these questionnaires and social studies that I participated in as a researcher with PhD researchers, we came closer to finding those answers. And then I wanted to check those results out with the Council of Eight. And, everything seems to mesh, that the information is good information.
Well, even in when you and Denise wrote Alien Abduction Files, she spoke about missing time. I think she didn't have any recall of it. It's the same that happened like 20 years after Betty and Barney's case. I don't know if she was even aware of, their story in the early 80s.
Well, in the incident in the early 80s, there was definitely conscious recall that something had happened. Ed, her husband, and Denise had observed these bright lights coming in toward them very rapidly. They'd observed them when they were descending a pass, a 10,000-foot pass in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
It was a route that they took every weekend during the summer, so they were very familiar with the route. They always stopped at the same places, got out of the car to stretch their legs, had a snack. They did everything. And then these lights were coming very rapidly toward them. Denise was trying to get Ed's attention, and what she said is that Ed's hands were gripping the steering wheel very tightly. She couldn't get his attention. It was as if he was in a trance already. And then she felt the car lift up, and there was a snow fence beside the highway, and it lifted up over the snow fence and traveled. She didn't know what happened next until hypnosis. I did separate hypnosis with Ed and Denise, just like Dr. Simon did with Betty and Barney Hill.
Mm-hmm.
So I could compare their statements. And so, they had that memory of being on the road, the lights, the car lifting, and then suddenly they found themselves on Trout Creek Pass, 40 miles away. When they had the first experience of the lights, it was daylight outside. It was in the summer, and it was only 6 or 7 o'clock at night. When they found themselves on Trout Creek Pass with no memory of how they got there, not only were they missing 40 miles, but it was dark. And when they checked the time, it was 11 o'clock at night. So many mysteries. Denise's family always met them at this camping area that they went to every weekend during the summer. Mother and father were there with a family friend, worried to death about Ed and Denise and their daughter Dee Dee. What had happened? Did they have an accident? Was the car broken down? And these were the days before cell phones. And so finally Ed and Denise arrived, and they told the family what they remembered, and the family thought they were making up a story, that they had done something else and they didn't want them to know about it. But then after talking with them, they realized that this was real. And I have a statement from Denise's mother that is in that book, and all of the evidence that I was able to collect about not only that, but about Denise's life and the experiences she had dating back to her childhood that have followed her through life. But I can tell you one thing. Since Denise and I started to work with the Council of Eight, we have not been abducted. I don't know why that is. But she had been abducted by insectoids, the mantis types, working with grays, and I had been taken just by grays. I have no memory of mantis types. It hasn't happened to either of us as far as we know, and both of us always had some memory.
Oh, okay. We're we have like 8 minutes left.
Mm-hmm.
I think we had missing time in there. It seems like we just got started and we're kind of winding up. But
that way.
yeah, but I do want to get in a couple questions for you.
Okay.
Like with Dan's Boru conference, they had handouts there for the visitors, and when I got, it's covering a early UFO sighting on April 23rd, 1897. It was also seen in Lindora, which great place to have the conference, very appropriate. Evans City, Zelienople, etc. A lot of these cities. I think it's about the same time, or the same, or at least the same year. John Keel mentions some of the airship sightings further down the Ohio River around Sistersville.
Mm-hmm.
From 1897 to 1961, and with Denise's reports that you two cover in Alien Abduction Files, is there becoming a pattern of their appearances or abductions that is evolving? Like, have they, just basically come to Earth to instruct humanity to be better people?
Well, I think that many of them came here to begin with in an attempt to instruct humanity. But then they realized that humanity was not ready to be instructed and refused the offer, and was frightened of them, very suspicious of them, and were not going to evolve in the way that they wanted us to. So when they realized that, they started taking our DNA. And what they told a woman in another case that I investigated, have information on, this was dating back to the 1950s, before Betty and Barney. But she was a lady from Texas who was taken. And the ETs told her that they were collecting DNA so that they would be able to determine who was going to survive the collapse of the Earth's ecosystem. And if you remember, back in 1954, that was one of the major messages, our environment. And we see now our ecosystem collapsing with so many animals who are becoming extinct.
Mm-hmm.
And humans, so many humans, losing the ability to reproduce. So it seems that that was the focus for a very long time. I don't know if it's still active. I'm hearing from most people, they're older now though, that they're not taking their DNA. I would like to hear from some younger people. I would like to know if it's still occurring with them. But they certainly had the ability to examine, do experiments with a great deal of human DNA. And they told Denise that they were attempting to create a more survivable species. So, and I know that the Greys were attempting to create a more survivable gray and to regain some of the things that they had lost over the thousands and thousands of years, such as their emotions. Um, Everyone used to say they didn't have any emotions. They don't say that anymore. They talk about the taller grays, the 5 foot tall and above grays emotions. So that's different from back when Bud Hopkins was talking about and introducing all of this. And also, the grays had lost the ability to reproduce naturally. That's something that they would like to have, so that they don't have to take human DNA to help them to reproduce and to reproduce in just these artificial gestational tanks.
Okay, and you have a couple conferences coming up, and maybe get some answers from the patrons?
Yes, absolutely. You can go to my website, and there's a list of the conferences where I will be speaking this year and a link to that. And the ones coming up are Roswell, 2 weeks, that's July 4th weekend. A week later, the MUFON International Symposium in Denver. Then over Labor Day weekend, the Exeter UFO Conference in Exeter, New Hampshire. And then one in Michigan, where I'll be speaking as well. So all that information is there with clickable links. You can purchase autographed copies of any of my books there. If you don't want an autograph, you can purchase ebooks and books that you can hold in your hand and read, but from Amazon, Barnes & Noble, other bookstores online, and read my articles. I have a lot of articles there that you can read as well. And if you need help, you can learn from those articles before you even come to me. But if you do what I was telling you, this show, please let me know if you were helped by it, because I'm attempting to collect data on who is helped. I hope it's 100%. I hope people stick with it, but I want to know.
Okay, and we're down to just about a minute. So, we're starting on another book. Are you at page 2 now? You were stuck at page 1 for a while.
Oh, I'm still at page 1. I decided it was time to take a break. You know, I've worked extraordinarily hard writing this past book. I was feeling pretty exhausted, doing shows every day, sometimes more than one a day, 7 days a week for about 3 months. And I thought, wouldn't it be good just to relax and enjoy some time with my husband?
Okay, we need to leave it there. I just want to thank you for being a guest, Kathleen, and we'll see everyone next week. Good night, everyone.
Good talking to you.